I would like to introduce you to my friend Jackie Drake. Jackie is a friend of mine from church, Parkside Green, and she has repurposed her life by starting a caregiving ministry. And so today on this Retire Purposefully program, I just wanted to introduce my friend to you because her caregiving ministry has been her passion and it is so well done. And she put such care into the caregiving ministry. And I really love that. And it shows. And it's so helpful for so many. And, caregiving is one of those um, phases of life that is fluid, right? So like you might be in a caregiving phase now, and then in a few years you're not. One of my caregiving phases when I retired the second time was for my mom, and then for my husband, and then for my daughter. So it kind of ebbs and flows. And I wrote about it in my book, The Art of Retirement, Opening the Next Door. And I was so thrilled when Jackie and her friend Kim started this ministry to help people who are caregiving. It's so important. So, Jackie, welcome. I'm so
Thank you.
here. And just tell us a little bit about your journey so far from your career, your family, moving where you live, the caregiving ministry, everything. And I'll listen
Oh,
and add, okay?
all right. Um, I was an animal science major in college with my sights set on a veterinary medicine. Along the way, that was back in the day when for a female to enter vet school, it was like one a year got accepted. And you just had to be the best at everything. And by the time I finished college, there's no question in my mind I would have been accepted to vet school, but I was worn out. And so I pursued another path, which was to move into a lab that was doing cancer research. And so that's really where my career began, was with cancer research. I've always had an interest in medicine and science and that kind of thing. So it was still a good fit. And eventually, I met someone and we married, and we had four children, three boys and a girl, and grew up in the Annapolis. They grew up mostly in the Annapolis, Maryland area. We did have to make a work move to Buffalo, New York, and that's where they finished growing up. And after they were all off in college or beyond, there was another work move, and we thought, well, we ought to live near somebody. So we moved here to Ohio, where one of our sons had settled down with a career and a home and little children and so on. This fast forward about 15 years, and that's when I met Tina. As we were going to church together. But in those 15 years, my husband and I had a few different caregiving roles in our life. One was for my aunt, who was single her entire life, and my sister and I were the only nieces. And as she aged, she needed some help, and she was mid 3 to 5 hours away from both of us. That made it a little complicated, but we helped her as best we could. And then, uh, there was a gap. And then my stepfather, who lived in Florida with my mother, developed Alzheimer's. And in that role, yeah, we were caregivers, but we were really supporting my mom, who was the main caregiver, and kept him at home until the very end when actually needed to be hospitalized. Uh, she worked very hard at that role. And when he passed, she was 90 and herself beginning to need care.
Right.
And that became our primary caregiving role. We were living in Ohio. We were both still employed. Um, my mom was in Florida, where she had been for many, many years. And she felt that a move would just be too disruptive. And also, she really hated the cold weather. So she wanted to stay in Florida as long as she could.
Yeah.
That kind of brings me up to maybe 10 years ago. Would you like a little more detail on those 10 years?
Um, does it include your mom?
Yes.
Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, her needs varied over those 10 years. She lived alone in her own condo, not in any kind of senior facility for that entire time. I'm not necessarily saying that was always good, but it she was capable of doing that with help. Of course, her need for help grew as time went along. We, went from going to Florida maybe 4 or 5 times a year to every other month, and then eventually long weekend every month. Um, I was doing crazy things like would fly home Monday morning and drive straight to work. And after a while, I began to realize that this was not sustainable. I was really concerned I was going to really make a major mistake somewhere at work with her or whatever that would have far-ranging consequences. So I cut back my hours at work. Fortunately, it was a flexible situation. Eventually, I cut back to where I was working one Saturday morning a month. That's how minimal it got. This time frame included COVID, which was complicated for everybody. Um, it
I
it
remember
made our
you were,
caregiving, pardon?
I remember when you were going through that.
Yes. It made our circumstances a little more complicated in that my mom was able to remain relatively isolated, which is not necessarily good, but it was necessary in that time because she is one of those rare people who are truly unable to get vaccines of any kind. So we had to be very careful not to take anything to her. My husband and I invested in a fifth wheel trailer so we could drive to Florida instead of flying. Um, we had her groceries being ordered and they would deliver them and put them on the sofa right inside the door so no one came in. She did have caregivers coming into the home,
Ooh,
um, sometimes once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on the situation. And we, at that point, unfortunately, had to cut back to going down about every maybe 4 or 5 times a year. My sister and I tried really hard to hit all the major holidays, birthdays, that kind of thing. Um, what I saw in her was unfortunately she was not able to participate in any family thing, and most of her all of her friends had passed.
mm,
And so she didn't have people to do things with. So we really upped our phone calls. At first, it was every day, then it was twice a day, and then it was multiple times a day, just to stay in touch, just to say, how are you feeling today? Just to say, did you see that television program? Or there's going to be this program on. You might want to watch it. Um, to try to keep her connected, because I do know she was very, very lonely in that time.
right. It sounds like she was with it though, cognitively. Yeah.
She absolutely was. She wanted to manage her own medications and had her own system for doing that.
Wow.
She paid her bills. I mean, sometimes she had trouble writing because of arthritis,
Yeah.
but she would have the caregiver, you know, we had coming in once a week, write them and that kind of thing. And then she'd put them in the envelope and he'd take them down to the mailbox. I mean, she
And
really was cognitively very, very good.
wow.
She lived to be 100 and a half
Oh,
and 2 days, which
wow.
is what she told the nurse the day before she passed.
Oh,
When the nurse said, "Are you 100?" She said, "I'm 100 and a half and 2 days." So that tells you how sharp she was.
yes, absolutely. That is such a blessing. And what a great
Yeah.
story of caregiving on your part and your sister and everybody. Now, So that was how many years ago?
Uh, she passed 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So then
Yeah.
tell us about your passion for this caregiving group and what it,
Well, I think it was, I think it was the summer before she passed, so 2.5 years ago. I had been asked to lead a discussion on a book at church for women, just a couple evenings in July. The book is by the author Linda Dillow, and the name of the book is Calm My Anxious Heart. The women's ministry was spending some time that summer looking at um, the subject of anxiety, which, we've all dealt with and is very prevalent in our culture, and we all need help with it.
Mhm.
And this book is an oldie but a goodie, is what I call it. I had read it several times actually, in each phase. When I was having fertility issues, I was anxious and I read the book. And then when I had little kids, I was anxious and I read the book. When I had adolescents, that kind of thing. So to my way of thinking, it was very good for all phases of life, but I had not read it recently.
Right.
One of the questions that she asks in the book is, what role have you encountered in your life that has been hardest? Because we have lots of different roles, lots of different hats we wear as women. And um, when I was reading it and preparing for the discussion, my first thought was this role of caregiving is really, really hard. And so we had two meetings, and I asked that question in both meetings because there were some overlap, but some different people in each meeting. And I asked people if they felt comfortable, if they would share their hardest role. And every single one of them shared a caregiving role. And I went last. So I hadn't set a precedent of, oh, she's expecting a caregiving role. They were all different.
Mhm.
They, there are as many different caregiving roles as there are situations, but everyone shared a caregiving role.
Mhm.
And um, that sort of stuck with me. And I kept coming back to that thought, that
Mhm.
I thought that was interesting.
Right.
And about 6 months later, I was talking with Kim, who had been in one of the groups, and I asked her if she had noticed that everyone had given the answer of a caregiving role. And she said yes, she
Mhm.
had taken note of that.
Yeah.
So at that point, we decided to think about it and pray about it and see if we thought this was something we should bring to the pastors as a needed ministry at our church,
Right.
supporting the caregiver.
Mhm.
And, time went by, and eventually we thought, yeah, let's go talk to them. And we did that, and they agreed that there was a need for um, a ministry to support those who find themselves in a caregiving role.
Right.
And so we, you know, scheduled an information meeting on a Sunday morning during the equipping hour, which is the hour before our worship service, when there are classes and things like that. And we had a handful of people show up and ask them to share their stories. And there was an interest, there was definitely an interest in this caregiver support. As a matter of fact, we even had two women who are professional caregivers show up saying how much they need support,
Okay.
even if they aren't in the middle of doing something personal in their life as a caregiver,
Yeah.
but as having that profession,
Sure.
because it is exhausting and it's relentless,
Yeah.
and they thought they could find some encouragement there. So we took people's information and said we asked things like, when's the best time for you to meet and what do you need help with, and lots of open-ended questions, and kind of went through all that and decided to start small. Most people said out of that group that Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, that's that equipping hour, was the best time for them to meet. And so we arranged to have a room once a month and to have meetings that start with prayer and making sure we know everybody who's in that room because it's different from month to month. Because when you're caregiving, your life changes on a dime, and you can't make a commitment to be there every month.
Right.
But we want people to know that they're welcome, even if they can only come once in a while, that we know who everybody is. So nobody gets sort of lost through the cracks, if you will. That's first thing we do. And then we take some time to look at some scripture on a particular topic, and then we have a discussion again on that topic.
Yes.
Lots of time for people to share what's going on in their life in some particular area, or if they're just having a bad week and need to share about it.
Right. Right.
Um, some examples would be the one meeting we had, we talked about the sacrifices of love.
Mm.
And some people shared about sacrificing their whole career to be a caregiver for a relative, or sacrificing what they thought their career might look like
Mhm.
in order to locate their family in the best place for someone they're caring for. Um, the second meeting we had was on self-care, um, where we talked about the different ways people might need to take care of themselves. Better nutrition, getting some exercise, being um, just having a few minutes to sit and think
Exactly.
before you get started with the day, whatever it is, that we all have different things that give us the care we need, but we need to be mindful to take care of ourselves as well.
Definitely.
In November, we talked about caregiving through the holidays, which is a whole big topic of its own.
Yes.
There's this temptation to just go, oh, forget it. I don't have the energy this time.
Right.
But I think we all decided that it's better to put a little effort out and to experience some of the joy of the holiday, even if it's not like it used to be.
That's right. That's right. And so, if you had any piece of advice for caregivers um, who are maybe beginning the caregiving role, what would you say?
Okay, well, I'm going to look here real quick because I made some notes about that topic because it was a very good question.
Hmm.
I think the most important thing to recognize is that no two caregiving situations are exactly alike.
True.
There'll be many similarities for sure, but they're just so many variables. They are not going to be exactly alike. And do not compare.
Right.
Don't say, why is that working for them and it doesn't work for me?
Right.
Um,
Right.
don't say, why does that person who's being cared for cooperate and the person I'm caring for is being so difficult and hurtful
Right.
to me right
Right.
now?
So much depends
Um,
on the personality of the person being cared for as well.
Oh, the personality of the person being cared for, the individual circumstances,
Right.
the siblings, the extended family, what services are available where you live, the kind
Right.
of home you live in.
Yeah. Yes.
There are just so many variables.
Yes.
And what I also would like to say to people who are just starting is occasionally you'll be sharing with someone and they'll say, well, you just dot, 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 you know, you just find somebody to come in and make them dinner,
Mm-hmm.
or you just, whatever it is, right? And you need to realize somebody gave me this advice that if somebody says you just, they don't really grasp your situation. Because if it were that simple,
Yeah.
you would have already done it.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So, not that they're trying to be hurtful or harmful, they just really don't understand.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you might have that person who won't eat what someone else comes in and
Right.
prepares, for instance,
Right. Right. Right.
and there's just too many details to
Um,
really be able to fully explain your situation.
Yes.
And what I try to do when I'm talking to someone is assume they are doing the best they can in their particular circumstances. And
Exactly.
what we want to do is come along and support them
And that's
and
so important.
encourage them
Yes.
in that role.
That's so good. I remember when my mom became blind. She was becoming blind. So we moved her from California to here to Ohio. And we tried having her in our home. And then she needed knee replacement surgery. And so to be blind and need knee replacement surgery,
Yeah.
it was very difficult. And a few times my husband traveled a lot. So she'd be with me, and a few times she fell. And the responsibility I felt, um, because I wanted the very best care for her, you know. And she actually said, Tina, I would love to be in an assisted living. I just want one room and I want a nurse to care for me or whatever. And I was like,
Yeah.
really? That's great. She said, yeah, just come visit me. And I did. I was there like probably too much. I was like part of you know, I was there constantly, and I did end up working there as well. But yeah, so that situation, like I had people say, "Oh, I would never put my mom in an assisted living." You can't say that.
That's another example.
You can't say that because I
Yeah.
thought I would either. But I mean, have you been in an assisted living? They're wonderful. Most of them are very wonderful, and they have people who care so deeply for your loved ones.
Hmm.
So you can't just make blanket statements like that.
Right. There's no one right answer. And in reality, there are no good answers.
Right, right,
That's what we're all looking for.
ex-
We want the very best for this
right,
person we love.
right. And when you bring
And
petitions to the Lord, He hears you and He directs your path, right?
mhm,
What verses would you say would be like the one that I think of is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Because
yeah,
in Proverbs, um, He will direct your paths. And I'm just wondering,
right.
is there one or two that you?
There's one that I would share. It's Psalm 91 verse 4. That
Huh,
and this is for the caregiver,
yeah,
okay? He will cover you with his feathers. He will shelter you with his wings. His faithful promises are your armor and protection.
yes, I
And
read
I was looking
this morning.
at Psalm 91 this morning,
Yeah.
and the entire psalm applies to the caregiver and placing yourself under God's protection as you carry out that role that he's brought into your life.
That's beautiful.
I actually had this thought that I'm going to go back and sort of write it out
Mm,
with that kind of thought in mind that that's how he's caring for me through a caregiving role.
I love that. I love that. That's funny because I have a book of Psalms, and this morning the Lord directed me to that very Psalm
Oh,
91.
that's
And I
interesting.
had the same visual of
Yes,
yes, so that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
right. It's one of the verses in it said, do not be afraid of the diseases. And
Mm,
I thought to myself, I've always read this and thought of it like, don't be afraid for myself of
right.
the diseases. But then I think about how much fear I had
Mm,
for my mom
yeah,
with the diseases that, she's very vulnerable and that kind of thing. And I
yeah,
didn't have, as a caregiver, I don't have to be afraid of the diseases either.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm afraid our time is about up. I don't want Zoom to end on us because it ends right away when, yeah, like
Yes, when it ends.
so, if there's one thing you would like to leave with everybody before we close, do you have anything additional you would like to say, or maybe how they could get in touch with you or our
Um, I think the best way to get in touch with me would be through Parkside Green Church. If you reached out to the church, that they would be able to give you my contact information if you wanted to come and give our group a try, or just we also have a email or Gmail thread where we're encouraging one another over the holidays, and you could be part of that if you wanted. Um, One of the things I would like to remind everyone that this is a season and a role in your life. It doesn't define who you are, and it does not create your identity. It may feel consuming, it may feel like it's never going to end, but it's not. So don't let those feelings um, allow themselves to create despair in your life
Mhm.
because it is just a season and it is one of many roles and it is not your identity.
Right. And what a privilege that the Lord has you in it at this time. May
Absolutely.
not
Yes.
feel privileged, but believe me,
It
you
it
realize
takes perspective to
it,
see that as a
yeah,
privilege. When
yeah.
you're in the middle of it, it
Sometimes
again, those
it feels
feelings,
no,
it doesn't feel like
no.
it.
But then after the fact, you realize, wow, I had that time
Yes.
with my mom or
I
whoever.
had that opportunity.
Yes, I had that opportunity. How wonderful,
Yes.
And like in my
Yeah.
case, my mom came to know the Lord um, through just not only me sharing, but the people around her that would visit her and the Bible study
Hmm.
went to there, and, opportunities that she would not have maybe had otherwise to hear the word. So,
Right.
how awesome is that?
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, Jackie, and
Oh, you're welcome.
for your time today.